Hei, mina olen Sten ning täna on minu vestluspartneriks mänguarendaja Evans, kelle käe all on valminud ka muuseas selline menukas mäng nagu Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Dean, how long have you been making games?
Whoa, I've been working in the industry for coming up to 20 years. It's like almost half my life has been working in the games business. But I moved into development about 8 years ago. So that's when I really started making games. But yeah, as I said, I've been in the business for quite some time. I started as a marketing executive, evil marketing, and realized that I love video games, and realized that I wanted to make video games, but I didn't really know how, because back then there wasn't any schools that would teach game design or anything like that. You know, if you wanted to work in games, you had to seek it, you had to hunt it down. And yeah, I really wanted to do it, set my mind to it, and pushed very, very hard and bugged a lot of people. Certainly one word of advice for anyone who wants to get in the games business is never give up. Always just constantly chase it. That's what dreams are for, right? Chase those dreams and catch them. Yes, so that was a very long answer for a very simple question.
No, it's okay. You pretty much answered my next question. Do you have like, what are some of the highlights of your career?
There's quite a few. Not getting fired from Ubisoft, that's a highlight. I'm kidding. I've worked at some really great companies and worked on some really incredible projects. One of the main highlights was the launch of PlayStation 2. I used to work at Sony. Mind-blowing times. Such an important console and an amazing launch. Working on San Andreas, that was quite a spectacular time. You know, it's the kind of project where you work on a title like that and you reached the ceiling. You know, it's like it's GTA. There's not much bigger than that, right? But I think really Blood Dragon was quite a big highlight of being able to Ubisoft really let us loose and let us really do whatever we wanted and trusted us a lot. Yeah, the project did okay. And considering the production time we had, it was just under 6 months of production. So I think the team did a pretty spectacular job with that amount of time. So that was fun. That was good. It was I think the highlight was when the game leaked, and we were so worried, right? Because you don't know when it's a PC build that gets leaked. You don't know how old that build is, and when you have a production time of just like 6 months, that build you didn't know if it was an alpha build, and in 6 months, every single day things were improving dramatically. So we didn't know if the build that went out was a really old build that was terrible. It's like how most games are when you're developing them. They're awful up until the very last minute. Like everything comes together. But yeah, once we realized that the build was actually the final one, it's like it's fine, live with it. It was great, good times.
Can you describe a little bit Blood Dragon, how the idea came to be? Like, at what point you thought, hey, let's put all this retro sci-fi and neon punk and lasers and dragons and this one awful song from Miami Connection in it?
Brilliant song, love that. So I'm a fan of that genre within movies, of growing up in that time, born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, so that was really my aesthetic that shaped me a lot. And I miss it. I miss it in entertainment. And video games just don't really make games like that anymore, with that kind of style and that aesthetic. Which surprises me, because games generally are supposed to be like fun and a bit dumb, and like that time period like fits it perfectly. And also, if you look at a lot of the big AAA kind of shooter games, one thing I always thought is that they're not really that more sophisticated than a 1980s or early 90s action movie. And to prove my point, it's like, let's make a 1980s, early 90s action movie and show that, you know, it's not that dissimilar. But yeah, really, it's like we just wanted to do something different. Like the mandate that we were given by Ubisoft was, you know, they wanted originally they wanted a DLC for Far Cry. But the way I would see it with DLCs is why make the same thing? Like, you've just spent $70 or whatever on a game. Why would you have a DLC that's exactly the same game again with, you know, maybe a new map? So, you know, we made arguably the worst decision of like, let's make an entirely new game and change everything. So, you know, there was a lot of late nights for everyone. But when you work on a project like that, because it's so different and so exciting, the level of motivation on the team just goes through the roof. So, you know, it was quite amazing. You know, I live to work, so I'm always at the office. But you know, when it gets to like kind of midnight and I'm just kind of wrapping up a little bit, you look around the studio and you see everyone's still there. It's like, yes, motivation. It's awesome. But yeah, God, I could talk about this for ages.
So let's do. Blood Dragon was generally positively received. If you finished the game, what did you expect, and was the final feedback surprising?
I hate pretty much everything that I work on, and like any kind of form of art, it's never finished. There were so many things that were cut from that game that really, really upset me a lot. So, you know, my overall attitude was a little tainted because of the things that got cut. But you have to remember, people don't know that, right? People don't know that they've got cut. It's only us on the production team. My first presentation, my first pitch to it, the first slide was, this is going to be massive. And some people were like, yeah, sure it is, it's a DLC. But again, people in our audience and gamers and our fans, you know, they want new stuff. Right? Like, I think people are getting tired of just the same shit again and again and again. So when something new and fresh and original comes along, people will buy onto it. And you know, with a great designer, a great creative director, Clint Hocking, come up with that phrase of ludo-narrative dissonance, of where, you know, the narrative intentions and gameplay realities kind of battle each other. So we have so many games that are these shooter games, which generally shooter games, and this is not an insult to shooter games, I love them, are a bit dumb, right? You know, you're running around and killing stuff. But then trying to inject a really serious tone on top of it kind of clashes a little bit. So we just wanted to take gameplay that is ridiculous and make sure that the story and the world is as ridiculous as the gameplay. Man, I was so the day that we announced it, and I had a good battle with the marketing teams about this, and let's announce on April 1st. Let's announce on April Fool's Day. And so many people, not just within Ubisoft, but outside of Ubisoft, that's suicide. You can't announce on April Fool's. And say, exactly, so let's do that. Nobody does it, exactly, so let's do that. And I think that really, really helped of showing everyone that April Fool's Day is a really good point for marketing activities, especially if what you're doing is actually real. But yeah, so I've become to really love April Fool's Day, and ever since release, I've been doing things on April Fool's Day now and screwing with people's minds. Yes.
Do you believe that Blood Dragon is somewhat of a trendsetter, considering that lately there have been more and more this style of games visually, and not just games, but in popular culture in general, like in movies and stuff like that?
Well, I think it's always been around, right? You know, like Blood Dragon has been inspired by so many other things. a very good friend of mine, a great film director called Jason Eisner, who made a fantastic film called Hobo with a Shotgun. That was a huge inspiration for Blood Dragon. It reminded me that the 80s aesthetic and awesome power synth like soundtracks, they have a place in modern video game, the modern video game environment. We just haven't seen it for a long time. So I think it's always been there. Maybe Blood Dragon did the same thing of what Hobo with a Shotgun did for us, which was remind people that people like this stuff, So it's amazing if people will think that Blood Dragon is an influential title that has helped a lot of things. That's really flattering. But I think it's always been there, and it's just, I don't know, that aesthetic. I don't know, is it nostalgia? That's one of the things I always think with it, is that what the kind of hook is? Is that why people are attracted to it, that it takes them back to a kind of a simpler times, I guess, of transporting people back to their childhoods. It's like Star Wars, right? When you watch the Star Wars trailer, like the majority of the feels that you get are how you were when you saw it as a kid and where you were when you saw Star Wars as a kid. I'm old enough to actually be when Star Wars came out. Oh dear, getting old. Look at this grey hair. Terrible. But yes, Blood Dragon inspired everything.
Yeah, that's the answer I was looking for.
It's the most important video game that's ever been released.
You told us about some of your high points. What about low points? Do you have anything that you look back to and think, damn, I wish I didn't do that?
Yeah, man, there's a lot. Oh God, go on for ages for this one. Pitching the game, because honestly, it was a nightmare. We changed all assets, changed everything, and like it was super hard work, and it wasn't the most kind of friendly production. When you have just under 6 months to make something, like very, very, very aggressive. Not fights or anything, but it's I like with any creative process, like with film or with games, it's stressful. But low points. I think things that got cut. Right? They were the ones that were really upsetting. Nunchucks got cut, like laser nunchucks. So they were to replace the blade. So your melee would be with nunchucks, but also you can hold down the trigger, spin them up, and then lob basically a mortar, like you're throwing like laser grenades from nunchucks. That got cut. But I think really when you kind of look what our job is, we make video games, so it's hard to have low points, right? When you're doing what you've always wanted to do, like every single person in that studio, they're doing their dream job, and you're living your dream. So it's hard to. In fact, I think it's stupid to think of low points or be upset. We're doing what so many people have always wanted to do and what we want to do, and we love it. It's all smiles.
Okay, let's talk about video games in general. What are some of the coolest games of past few years you can name, and what makes a good game for you?
I think my favorite game of the last few years and probably of all time is GTA 5. I think what those teams have managed to do is nothing short of genius. And what for me makes those games work so well is the small little attention to detail. That all of those tiny little bits of detail, when put together, like just make something absolutely spectacular. And those guys are the champions of taste and relevance. Every single thing in that game is up here. They don't have to make something that panders to the lowest common denominator. They always strive to make the best thing that's out there. And it's funny, I kind of see you have like video games business and then you have Rockstar. They're kind of doing their own thing, right? The Fallout series, I'm started playing Fallout 4 just before I flew out to Estonia, and I've been having Fallout dreams, like total withdrawal systems. It's like absolutely nuts. So they're the two, I think, really on a big kind of triple A or quad A, whatever you want to call them, that have really kind of stood out for me. From I think one of the other real kind of standout moments, seems weird to say this, is Flappy Bird. Like, the game's not the greatest game, but just looking at what cultural effect it had, it was nuts. Like, it owned the world for a good couple of weeks, right? And, it's just a tiny little game with awkward controls. And I think really it shows that, again, that games, they have this ability to capture people's imagination, and so many people are like, oh, I hate video games, I don't play games. Do you play Flappy Bird? Yeah. It's like, okay, like, you do. Are you on Twitter? Yeah, that's a game. Like, it's but I'm really happy to see mobile space really doing well, and a lot of friends and peers in the indie scene doing very, very well, and being able to really kind of flex their artistic and creative muscle. And I think we're really going to see and starting to see how the indie scene is really influencing like the big kind of publisher scene. I think we're going to see a big change in the video game, the AAA scene, in terms of level of quality and just kind of styles of games. Like, I think all of us as fans of video games want to see new stuff. And the indie scene is proving that you can make very different, like, kind of abstract games that can be really successful. And it's the same thing with Blood Dragon. Yes, I know it's a shooter game, but it's a very kind of different look. Same Child of Light from Ubisoft, of these kind of lower price point, slightly different games with a much more of much more of a free approach to it, like creatively, and they do well. As I said, people want new shit. People want to try new stuff and have new experiences. And if you just keep making the same game again and again and again, like, it's not that exciting. Yep.
So, last but not least, what does the future bring to you, to Blood Dragon, and to video games in general?
I think the future for me is going to be probably quite a nice dinner tonight. I'm quite excited about that. So I'm working on a few things. I can't talk about them. Like, nothing's announced, but very, very exciting stuff. For Blood Dragon, you'll have to keep your ears to the ground. There may be something, there may not be something. Check out on April the 1st. I hope that people want some more stuff from Blood Dragon. I think it's an interesting IP, even though it was just like a little spin-off of something. I think there is possibilities of going somewhere with it, but none of that's my decision. So I'm not in charge of all of that. But for the video games business and moving forward and how things are going to change, and I feel like I'm personally very excited for the future of VR, of spending a lot of time using it, and remembering its first cycle that came out like back in like 90, 91, and of playing it then and mind being blown by the potential of it. But of course, like, the hardware just wasn't there and the content wasn't necessarily there. It's very rudimentary, And now we're at a point where you can have almost close to photorealism in VR, and it's a very strange experience. So I'm very excited to see where that's going to be, like, in a good five years. And I think we're all going to be very obsessed with it. I believe it will be the next big thing. But yeah, I'm happy to see more and more people making games. That's the exciting thing, of the accessibility of so many new tools and so many engines for people at a very cheap price, or even sometimes free. So it's wonderful to see more and more people making games. Great to see more and more game jams happening all over the place. More and more schools and colleges teaching people how to make games. And like I say, it's an amazing industry, and one that is still in diapers. You know, it's crazy. I think you go back, you know, like just even 30 years ago, and it's just like one dude in his like bedroom making video games. And now, you know, you look at studios like Ubisoft Montreal, where we have like 2,600 people just in one studio. You know, growth is insane. So yeah, but it always shows, if you go back to those original days, that, you know, it's possible to do this with one person, and the indie scene is really showing that you can make something magical with just one great mind and one great idea. But yeah, you can also make huge mammoth beasts like with thousands of people. It's a great industry, but again, it's one that constantly changes. So it's really hard to predict where it goes, because technology is always evolving. And that's the painful thing about this business, is that, you know, you're always having to evolve with that technology. That you perfect something, you become an expert at it, then something new comes out. Like, okay, do that. So you're just always iterating. So it keeps you on your toes, and you're always learning, so that's a good thing. Stay in school, kids. Like,
Awesome, thank you.
thank you very much. Respect the beard.